This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris. Welcome to the Photography Guild.
This month we're going to be talking about shadows and silhouettes. The thing that's great about learning about these two types of photography is that they can really add interest to your photos, and if you put books or albums together, they really stand out. I think they really have a nice combination of simplicity and drama. So when you're using your camera, instead of hating the shadows and running from them, let's learn how we can use them to make our photographs look really great. So what makes this kind of photography interesting? Well, what it does is when you're creating an image like this out of shadows and silhouettes, you many times are creating images that have a lot of contrast and a lot of intensity. And many times the images are creating lines that you don't naturally see in nature. Now in this photograph here, this was just of a cement staircase going up with the handrail on the side, and what was happening is because of the way the shadows were running, it created this really distorted, misshapen image going up the staircase that I thought was very striking. So what I chose to do was actually make the shadow the subject of this photograph. Well, that's something that we can do with this type of photography. We can take ordinary subjects like cement stairs and make them an interesting image by creating and capturing the shadows that are around it. Now, another fun thing to do is to photograph people, but in a whole new way, getting their shadows or their silhouettes. You no longer have to point your camera right at a person's face and have them get all nervous and things like that. And I found that when you shoot people's shadows and silhouettes, you can actually get them to be much more expressive with their bodies than they would normally be if you were shooting them, when they were nicely lit. So the strategy for this type of photography is you want to make sure that your subject is in front of the light. And then that way, when you point your camera, you want to trick your camera into exposing to the brightest part of the photograph. And then that way, your subject will be really underexposed and black. Now, using silhouettes in your photography really shows the drama of shadows, and that can be so fun. You can photograph not only people, but buildings and flowers and trees and animals, and it's just so interesting. This happens to be a photograph of a salmon that was swimming by at a stream cutaway that I was visiting up in South Lake Tahoe. And he became this silhouette in my image because the background was so bright behind him that he was just this black image swimming by. Well, the thing to consider when you're doing silhouette photography is the shape identifiable to the viewer, or does it have some kind of artistic bent to it? You don't just want to have black blobs in your photograph. They need to be able to be either aesthetic to the viewer or hold some kind of identifiable meaning. So if you want to play with this kind of photography, what do you do? Well, the first thing you want to do is start to look for shadows. And a couple of ways to do this is to catch the light early in the day or late in the day. When you're shooting outside, you can really use those long shadows that are produced by the low-angled sun and lead your viewer's eye in a really interesting way. And then you can also get really interesting photographs when the shadows angle in toward the camera, and that can create some really interesting images. Now, the second thing you want to do is you want to make sure you choose a strong subject and actually make it the focus of your image. You know, shadow photography is pretty unconventional. We don't see it all that much, and it can be such an exciting type of photograph. The thing is, though, you want to make sure that you choose distinctive shapes. If it's going to be the subject of the photo, make it distinctive. You're not going to have the luxury of relying on color to carry the image. You're going to have to really choose your subjects carefully. Now, the third thing you need to do is make sure that you turn off your flash. You want as little light on the front of the subject as possible. Now, your camera, if you have it on auto, is going to want to put light on the subject. It's trying to say to you, hey, you're not going to be able to see this palm tree if I don't turn the flash on for you. But you definitely do not want the flash on. Now, the fourth thing is your lighting, and it's important that with this type of photography, in fact, your lighting is the exact opposite. Normally, we do want our subject lit, but in silhouette and shadow photography, we don't. We want the light behind our subject. Now, in this photo here in Maui, I mean, a sunset, palm trees, you're just asking for a silhouette right there. And so whenever you see something with that really bright light source and you see an interesting image in front of it, you have the opportunity to create a really beautiful silhouette photo. Now, the fifth thing to consider is make sure that you choose a plain and bright background for your shadow or silhouette. Now, you'll notice here, this is some pumpkin leaves, the shadow that's going and casting on an actual pumpkin. But you see the pumpkin is very brightly lit, and it's got a little bit of a texture, but it's very, very plain, the background is. Number 6 is you want to make sure your composition is very distinct and uncluttered. You don't want to have so many shadows going on that it's confusing to the viewer as to what they're actually looking at. So now let's talk a little bit about what your camera should be doing for this type of photography. Well, if you're going to be shooting in auto mode, you're going to have to trick your camera a little bit. Most of our modern digital cameras have really great metering systems in them, and they are really good at sensing how much light an image needs to be well lit. That's what they're designed to do. So you're going to have to trick your camera a little, and here's how you do it. Point your camera to the brightest part of the picture that you're going to want to take. Press your shutter down halfway. Now remember, that's also how we pre-focus, but at the same time, it's going to trigger that metering, the light metering mechanism. And so it's going to be thinking, oh, this is what I need to do to light this picture, this subject really well. Well, before you let go of the shutter to press down all the way, move your camera back into framing your shot the way you want it and finish taking the photo. That way your subject will be really underexposed and you'll get it to be that very dark, shadowy silhouette look that you're going for. Now, if you're shooting in manual mode, the first thing you might consider doing is taking a photo of this subject, but in auto mode, and just see what type of aperture and shutter speed settings the camera's naturally using. That at least gives you sort of a benchmark to work with. Now, if you notice that your subject is coming in a little too light, then you may want to make your shutter speed a little longer. And if you find your subject is out of focus, and that's an important part of shadow and silhouette photography, we want crisp looking images since that's the focus. So what you might want to do is you may have your aperture set to too shallow of a depth of field. So stop it up a little bit and go for a deeper depth of field. So the assignment this month is to start looking and capturing some shadow and silhouette photography. Now remember, you can use animals like I did in my salmon at the stream cutaway. That center photograph there is actually the shadow of a hammock on sand. or if you've got a beautiful sunset or sunrise, if you're so brave to get up that early in the morning, go for it. Just start looking. I really think that if you start looking for these sorts of shadows and silhouettes, you're going to find that they're really fun and a nice addition to your photography. So the next time we get together, we're going to be doing wildlife and animal photography. And I thought this would be fun for those that have pets, or you like to photograph birds either in your backyard or in the wild, or if you're a big camper or an outdoorsman and you see all kinds of amazing animals out in the wild, that we'll learn some fun tips and tricks on how to make great photos of those images. I also want to remind you, please share any of your photographs from our silhouette and shadow lesson. Fly them up to Flickr. We had some beautiful photographs shared with our last episode on travel photography, and I want to thank those photographers so much for sharing them up on our Flickr site. It just is so inspirational for everybody else. So while the days are still long, go out and see what kinds of shadows and silhouettes you can find in your world. Have fun!
For more information on this episode, go to our website and visit the Photography Guild show notes. Also, if you have any questions or ideas, send us an email. Thanks for watching.